Hello and welcome to another episode of the Do You Remember podcast, the podcast that takes us back to happier times. My name is Adam Anwar, I am your host, and today I'm joined by stand-up comedian Andrew Grogan.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, and today we're going to be talking about Scream. So Andrew, for those who don't know, give us a brief synopsis. What was Scream?
Scream is basically a horror movie franchise that started with the first film in 1996. It originally started as a trilogy, then they made Scream 4 in 2011, followed by a TV series, and it's your basic story in the horror slasher genre of a group of teens being stalked by a masked killer, starts taking them off one by one, and they have to find out who it is before they all end up slaughtered, and it all ends in a big, dramatic bloody showdown.
Yeah, you've got me all excited already for it. I cannot wait to dive into this. So just a little bit of reference before we start. Me and Andrew, we're both around the same age, 30, 31. So when Scream came out originally, we would have been about 8 years old. So Andrew, when was the first time that you remember hearing about Scream?
I don't remember when I heard about it exactly, but when I was a kid, like 14, too young to go out drinking, we had Blockbuster back in those days. You remember Blockbuster?
It's funny you should mention Blockbuster because me and my mates, what we used to do is we used to go to one which was in Walkden. And you know how they have the top 10 charts of all the films they recommend you to watch? And obviously it's all the modern releases and all the most expensive ones. We used to go there and we used to just put our favourite films in the top 10 and always rearrange it. Just little arseholes. I bet the people working there were sick of it. I bet all the little kids used to go and do it. But that's one of the things we used to love doing in Blockbuster. Because we couldn't afford to actually rent stuff ourselves because we were too poor.
So that was our thing, like my dad would take me and my sister to the video store or to Blockbuster, and he would rent out movies for us. And I got to 14 and, typical teenager, I got really interested in the horror genre. I liked all these slasher films, so he started renting them out for me. So I must have watched Scream when I was about 14 the first time.
Seeing as you watched it at such a young age, did you find it scary at all?
I had a slight disadvantage in a way because I'd already seen Scary Movie, which parodies Scream a lot before I saw Scream. Sort of some parts where I was probably meant to be scared, where I was actually just laughing because it's like this is a bit in Scary Movie where this happens, and laughing my head off. But yeah, my sister watched it with me as well, and her best friend when I was about 14, so she would have been about 10 years old. We watched it for the first time, and then afterwards, she and her best friend both asked me to get knives out of the kitchen so they could go to the bathroom armed.
That's a classic little sister move, isn't it? And that's the relatable thing, isn't it? Because it was also a classic dad move as well. Like, no, Andrew, you're too young to drink in this country. You have to be 18. So yeah, I'm going to give you this film Scream that you also have to be 18 to watch in this country. Ah, well, fuck it.
Yeah, well, I think that's I think some parents are like that, aren't they? Either it'll toughen you up or scare the shit out of you. One of the two. To be honest, I don't care. Just leave me alone. Stop nagging me.
Yeah.
My dad's a little worried that I'm still into horror films now. It's a never-ending arguments like, Andrew, you really should be out of this phase by now. You're 30 years old. What are you watching these crappy horror films for? And I'm like, Dad, they're not crappy. Okay, if you take the time to look at it from an academic perspective, you can see the horror genre reflects our fears in modern day society. And I'm like, and if we're talking about sick here, at least all my horror movies are fiction. You're watching war movies. My dad's obsessed with war movies, like World War II and Vietnam and all that stuff. It's like, your films are actually based on real events. So who's the real sicko at the end of the day?
I feel like there's a bit of a cinematic civil war going on between you and your dad here.
Quite possibly. We are cut from different pieces of cloth. Like I say in my comedy, my dad's a Daily Mail reading Tory, very straight-laced.
Mm-hmm.
I, on the other hand, am a gay Gothic liberal who's very much into the arts. So we have been disagreeing for years about this sort of thing, but he can't change me and I can't change him. And well, at this point, it's just a matter of time to see who dies first.
Well, at least I suppose you can both enjoy watching people die on screen. I suppose that's one thing you've got in common.
Yeah, in a way, we just have different ways of going about it. My dad enjoys watching stories based on real human suffering. I watch stuff on stupid, pretty people getting killed. Yeah. So who's the real psycho?
I think that's way above my pay grade, to be honest with you. That's one for Freud to handle. But to bring it back to Scream, you mentioned you and your dad both have differing views and differing tastes. What was it about Scream that really appealed to you? What was it that made you a fan of this film and this franchise?
I was just a fan of the horror genre in general at the time. I loved these slasher movies. I watched all the classics and I just wanted to go from the next high. I wanted to see how much I could scare myself and how much these movies could actually scare me, sort of test my limits, I suppose. And Scream was a good one. Scream I watched very early into my horror film days, and I kind of liked it as well because it had a bit more of an edge to it. It was, self-aware, it knew what it was doing, and you had a very good team of actors behind it as well. I mean, when you have a bunch of stupid actors or bad actors in a horror film who are just there because they're pretty, it can make for a very lame horror film. But because you have got a pretty talented cast of actors who are good looking but can also act in this film, it makes it one of the better ones.
So before we go any further, I think I should make it abundantly clear there's going to be spoilers in this. So spoiler alert, spoiler alert. Although the film did come out in 1996, so if you've not seen it but you're listening to this podcast, why? Go and watch the film and then come and listen to us. But yeah, Andrew, I think you're absolutely correct, to be honest with you. The casting in this film was absolutely fantastic. Going from the start, we've got Drew Barrymore in the opening scene, which is just absolutely fantastic and mind-blowing that someone of that calibre at this time was put in that opening scene. And then you've got the two killers. You got Billy Loomis and you got Stewart, played by Skeet Ulrich, and Matthew Lillard, who I think was absolutely brilliant in both of those roles. Neve Campbell as Sidney Prescott. Then you got Courtney Cox as Gail Weathers. You've got Rose McGowan as Tatum Riley. You've got David Arquette as Deputy Dewey, who's just ridiculous in this film. You've even got the Fonz. The Fonz plays the head teacher. This is such a great cast, and they all play their characters absolutely brilliantly for me. Another thing I think they got absolutely correct in this film is the way that the main cast were the kind of cool, good-looking, kind of popular kids. Now, this wasn't really the narrative at the time in these kind of horror films. It was always the creepy weirdo, the loser, the ugly kid, the one who's got no friends who turns out to be the bad guy and the killer. Whereas in this one, it was two people with good-looking girlfriends who just decided they're going to go out of batshit crazy and kill everyone. So it really went against type. It wasn't like the kid who drowned in the well.
Yeah, and I also liked Courtney Cox was the one who really impresses me in those movies because I'm one of those people. I think everyone has their different standards about what makes a good actor and actress, but one of the things for me is that what makes a good actor and actress is if they can play two different roles and you don't see any trace of the other character in them. Courtney Cox obviously is very famous for playing Monica from Friends, this crazy, cleaning obsessed bit of a plonker, really, isn't she? And then you got Gail Weathers, who is a hard-nosed, bitch, ambitious journalist. Doesn't
driven.
give a damn who she hurts. She wants the story. She wants the power. And I don't see when I watch Scream, all the Scream movies, I see Courtney Cox. Obviously, I recognize the actress, but they are two completely different characters, and I do not see Monica in her, and I do not in Gail Weathers, and I do not see Gail Weathers and Monica, two completely different characters.
Yeah.
And that to me shows, that she's a really good actress. She's, a dark horse because it takes skill to do that. I can totally buy her as just two separate characters without seeing any hint of the other one in these two iconic franchises.
Definitely, I always think that whenever I see Will Smith in anything, I always think, wow. Because I remember the first time I thought it, I was watching the film Ali, about Muhammad Ali.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was watching it, I was actually thinking, wow, Will Smith has done such a good job. And not only am I not thinking about the Fresh Prince anymore, but I'm believing that he is Muhammad Ali right now. I'm believing what I'm seeing, and I think Will Smith's exactly like that. But yeah, you brought up a great point with Courtney Cox with that. But I think this is obviously where she met David Arquette as well for the first time, who ended up becoming a husband.
Yeah, I think they may have met. I don't know, timing might be a bit off here, but he did star in an episode of Friends as well.
I thought that was after they were married.
I'm not sure. They might have. I think the two may have overlapped. Can't be too sure of the timeline, whether they met on the Scream set or whether they met on the Friends set.
Right.
But yeah, eventually they did, end up marrying. But yeah, you've got all these people in that show where, they were the sort of brat pack of the 90s in a way, especially the people playing these teenage roles. You had Skeet Ulrich, you had Rose McGowan, Neve Campbell. These were the teen stars of the 90s. And
speaking of Skeet Ulrich, have you seen the Netflix TV show Riverdale? Because in that, I think the people who cast that came up with a genius idea, because obviously Riverdale is a TV show that's made for teenagers, but what they did is they cast all these people in it, like Luke Perry playing Fred Andrews and Skeet Ulrich playing Bonehead's dad. And what they did was they cast those in it so that the parents of today's teenagers can watch it, and they can watch their teen idols back from the 90s on the same screen. And I thought that was a really clever twist to bring in today's teenagers and their parents at the same time. And you were mentioning before actors with range, and I know it's not really on the same level, but you've got Matthew Lillard in this film playing Stuart as one of the murderers, one of the killers, and I think he's fantastic in this role. But he also played Shaggy in Scooby-Doo, and credit where it's due, I thought he was a really good Shaggy, so to be able to play someone who's really, really kid-friendly and also play someone the complete opposite, this murderous psychopath, he's someone who had a lot of range, and there's a lot of talented actors in this movie.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you've got a talented bunch there, and Nev Campbell had already done a pretty iconic cult film before that called The Craft, which I don't know if you've seen that. That was definitely a film for our generation as well. It's a cult classic, about witches and stuff. So
yeah, I remember it.
So she's gone on to do good things, and obviously Rose McGowan went on to do Charmed, which is another iconic 90s series. So yeah, the cast itself is pretty iconic, and the film itself is iconic. It's discussed, amongst academics who study film genre.
Definitely, academically, this is seen as a really key movie in the entire slasher genre, isn't it? And one of the things they did really well in Scream is, I mentioned Drew Barrymore before and how amazing it was that she was in this film. It's because at the time, she's like a genuine A-list kind of celebrity, if I'm not mistaken. And they have her in the very first scene, and you're thinking, wow, this is Drew Barrymore, she's the biggest name in the film, she's getting attacked by the killer in the intro to the film, surely she's going to escape the killer, she's going to be the final girl, and it's going to be like an entire showdown between Drew Barrymore and the killer. But they completely flip the script on you. The killer murders Drew Barrymore in the opening scene. Is absolutely incredible. And the fact that they did that, I think it really shocked a lot of people. And that's one of the things that really pulled me in. The fact that they did that. And not just that, but the gruesomeness of the murder. The way they made it so on edge and genuinely scary, where she's getting that phone call at the beginning. It's a really clever opening scene to a film. Because it really sets the tone for the movie. If they can kill off Drew Barrymore, the biggest star, in the very first scene, then anything can happen in this movie. And when you're watching a slasher film, when you're watching a horror film, you really want to make sure that anything can happen. You want to be on edge all the way through, because the worst thing is when you're watching a film or you're watching a TV show and you're thinking, they can't kill this character, he's going to be in it all the way through, she's going to be in it all the way through, they'll never kill him off. Like when you watch Doctor Who, for example, you always think whatever happens to him, it doesn't really matter, because he's going to get out of it and he's going to survive, so the stakes aren't really that high. But in this, they made the stakes sky high from the beginning, the way that they did that to Drew Barrymore, killing her off. Anyone can die in this film. You don't know what's going to happen. And I really love the whodunit aspects of movies like this as well, where you don't know who the killer is. It's not those ghost films when there's no real killer. I love it when there's a proper killer, you don't know who it is, and you've got to figure it out all the way through, and it's usually someone that you don't expect at the end. Feel free to disagree, but I think this is the best opening scene in any film that I've ever seen.
It was quite scary as well. I think there's, after you just get glimpses of him, there's a chase scene where the house is on fire and she just sees him run across the corridor, and then she is hiding outside the house. She looks up in the window and then he turns around and it's at his face. Then, climbs through the window, kills her, and then there's one bit at the end and you just think she's legging it, and you think this is the part where she gets away because it's Drew Barrymore. And then, it's slow motion, and then he actually stabs her.
Yeah.
She's actually, and you're like, shit. And there's this bit where she just sort of pulls his mask off, and then you just see the knife over and over again. And that did give me chills as a teenager. Like I said, I'd seen a scary movie before, but it was still quite chilling. And then you just see her being dragged along the ground, holding onto the phone.
Exactly.
With the last gasp of breath. It was, it was for a slasher film. It was scary.
It's like a
At that time, I
nightmare
understood why
scenario
my
as well,
sister and her
isn't it?
best friend asked me to get knives. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nightmare scenario. You've got this young, good-looking girl. She's at home. She's waiting for a boyfriend to turn up. She's making popcorn. They're going to watch a film. Everything's happy, and the phone rings. Okay, cool, no problem. The phone always rings. She answers it. Wrong number. They phone again. Oh, I just want to apologize. Why? Because I want to know who I'm looking at. What did you say? I want to know who
Yeah.
I'm talking to. And then it
Gets
starts to
scary.
build. It starts to build like, oh, my
Oh,
boyfriend's
the
going to come
tension
over and
does
he plays
build.
football and he'll kick your ass and all that stuff.
Yeah, the tension builds quite well in that opening scene. It's very well done, and obviously it's Wes Craven, who is no stranger, who is like a horror legend. So
Yeah.
I expect nothing less from the king of horror himself.
But yeah, it's such a
Um,
classic and fantastic opening scene. Then obviously they end up,
but
they
yeah,
kill the boyfriend, they kill her, and then just as the parents get home as well, and obviously
oh
we're,
yeah,
we're looking at it from a different aspect. You know, we're both 30, we don't have kids, but imagine if you're watching this as like an adult and you're watching this as someone who's got a teenage daughter. You think, wow, I've done everything I can for them. They've got this nice, lovely house in the middle of nowhere, and then they get home and she's been butchered and she's hanging from the swing with her
oh
insides coming
yeah,
out. It's such
yeah,
a vivid scene, and it's beautiful. It's fantastic. Beautiful from a dark
grotesque point
standpoint.
of view.
Yes.
Yeah. But oh yeah, I mean, I like the fact that there's a little bit, you know, the film is self-aware. It knows in a way it's making fun of horror movie cliches that lists the rules of the horror movie, doesn't it? But there is a bit of drama to it as well that give the
Hmm.
characters a bit of backstory. Usually in this type of film where you've got these good-looking teenagers, they're just pretty vacuous. There's no substance to them. You're just watching pretty people get killed. In the good horror movies, there's a bit of backstory, so you actually warm up to the characters. Like you learn Sydney, the final girl in this film, played by Nev Campbell. She's actually mourning her mother, who was murdered a year ago, and now the
Hmm.
killer starts claiming that the person who's killed these teenagers claims that he's the real killer. He's the one who
Yep.
killed her mother. When she sent a man to prison, it was her testimony that sent a man to prison for this murder. And then you also, she's also talks about how she has to deal with the fact that her mother had a reputation of being promiscuous because she hears girls making fun of her mother, calling her mother a tramp, and then also how it's affected her relationship with her boyfriend. Like she's hesitant to get physical with him because the whole story is, you know, around how her mother was sleeping around a bit around the town. So it's made her a
Yeah,
bit
sure.
sexually
She doesn't want
cautious.
the same. She doesn't want to have the same thoughts about herself, does she? She doesn't want people to think the same of
Yeah,
her.
it's given her intimacy issues.
Sure.
So there's a
So
bit of
just to,
backstory there that helps you develop warmth for the characters. So if you in a horror genre, you definitely have to develop warmth for these characters because they're all just pretty vacuous people. Then you don't care. You're just enjoying them getting sliced and diced. But if you invest emotionally in these characters, then you're actually sad to see them get killed in a way.
definitely, because you really do root for her, especially with everything that's gone on, and she seems so vulnerable because her dad leaves town, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He's gone to a conference or something. But yeah, you touched on a great point, the fact that we're hearing about that these murders happened a year before. So it's kind of like we're watching the sequel, but it isn't a sequel, it's the first one. Usually we'd
Mm,
see the first killings, usually we'd go through all that. We'd go through the fact that Liev Schreiber's character was going to prison. But in this one,
yeah.
it's like, no, we're going to cut forward to this because this is the better starting point. We're going to have all the
Yeah.
teenagers be attacked, and then all this backstory that's like, whoa, a mum got murdered. What
Mm,
happened there? And there's all this mystery surrounding it, and you don't really find out what happens till later on in the film. It's brilliant. But just to touch back on the opening scene for a second, one of the things that the killer says, and this is a famous quote: "What's your favorite scary movie?"
What's your favorite scary movie?
Ooh, tricky. I've watched so many. I've watched all the classics. I'd say Halloween is definitely up there
I'm afraid that was a wrong answer.
because that set the standard. It may not have been the first slasher movie. I think you had Psycho in 1960, which was probably the first example of the slasher genre, and then Black Christmas came about in 1974. But I think Halloween in 1978 set the standard for horror films, especially
Yeah.
the slasher genre. So that is definitely up there with my favorites. But the one that's the one that scared me the most, the gory ones anyway, because you've got your gory slasher genre films, and you've also got your scary ghost movies as well. Creep was one that scared me. Creep is 2004 film. It stars Frank Potente, the girl from the Bourne Identity, and she plays a woman who gets trapped in the London Underground. That is scary. That is really scary. I would recommend anyone listening to that, if you're a horror fan, go and watch that movie. It's scary.
I've not seen that. I'll have to go and watch that one, actually.
Yeah, well, the thing is, though, what I remember watching this movie because, like I say, my dad used to rent us horror movies, and I watched it. Little sister again wouldn't bugger off, insisted on watching this movie, and I was like, okay, but it's 18. It's supposed to be really scary. I was about 15. She was about 11. She's like, yeah, whatever. She watches the movie. She's scared shitless. She leaves the land. She can't sleep. The landing light is on all night, so I can't sleep. And then she comes up, and my mum comes home about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and my sister just bursts out of her room, running down. Says, Mum, Andrew made me watch this really scary movie. Now I can't sleep because I'm really scared. I'm like, you lying little bitch, you fucking wanted to watch it. And then my mum's banging on my bedroom door saying, what are you doing watching these sick movies with your sister? What kind of older brother are you? And I'm like, she fucking wanted to watch it. She wouldn't bugger off.
That's classic little sisters, isn't it? Always getting you into trouble.
Creep is one of the scariest at the time. You can tell if a scary film is actually scary because it will leave you unsettled afterwards.
Yeah.
And it might just make you do that thing of checking, are all the doors closed? Are all the windows locked?
Yes, definitely.
I might just check. I might just double check just to be on the safe side.
Yeah, well,
so that was definitely one of the scariest ones that I'd seen. But it's very hard to scare me now. I've built up an immunity. I've watched so many of these slasher films, of these ghost films. It's quite hard to scare me. But I remember at the time, that was one that really shit me up.
Yeah. Well, this is actually mine. Scream is actually my favourite scary movie. Not from the aspect of it that it's scary. It's just my favourite horror movie. Honourable mentions, though, ones that are more on the scary side, is The Strangers. There's one scene in The Strangers that really freaked me out when I watched it, and I think it's Eden Lake. Is it Eden Lake where they end up in the toilet at the end? Have you seen that one, Michael Fassbender?
Yeah, Eden Lake with Kelly Rice with the ginger girl. Yeah. Oh my God, that is really that was really good because there's no scary killer in a mask. You're dealing with feral kids basically.
Yeah, and she kills a couple makes
it scary though because
then she ends up in the toilet at the end, and then all the parents turn on her, don't they?
Yeah.
Is that the one?
Oh my God, yeah, that was an ending I wasn't sort of ready for. And when it happened, it was this was before Game of Thrones, before we got used to seeing good people get killed and shit. I wasn't ready for that at the time. But that is Eden Lake is a good one. It's a classic. I do remember that. One of my favorite. Oh, Descent as well. The Descent is a brilliant horror movie. It's got. Have you seen it? 6 Women in the Cave.
I don't think so.
Oh,
well,
you should
not
watch
that one
that,
anyway.
mate.
I've seen a few films like that, but not.
Yeah, The Descent. It's got 6 women in a cave, and it's really, really good. I would definitely recommend. None of their storylines feature about men or anything like that. It's just really good. But going back to Scream, Scream is an important film in the slasher genre. Halloween may have set up all these rules, and Scream talks about these, and it uses some of the rules, and it also flips some of them on their head. It's sort of like revitalizing the genre in a way, because by the 70s and 80s, slasher films were all the rage because they were cheap to make. All you needed was a few tons of ketchup, some pretty actors, and a scary setting and a costume, and boom, you had a horror movie that was so cheap to make, and people loved them. Teenagers loved them. But by the 90s, they were sort of on their way out.
Yeah, I think it'd been overdone, and they'd used a lot of sequels, hadn't they? Halloween was probably on about 12 by that point. Friday the 13th was probably on its 40th installment. Nightmare on Elm Street as well.
It was dying a slow death, and film genres need to be revitalized if they're going to continue. So Scream sort of did that. It acknowledged the genre by being self-aware of these rules and even talks about these rules. In horror movies, that they're all having this big talk. And it's like, rule number 1, you can never have sex.
And rule number 2, you can never drink. That was one of the best things about the film for me, how self-aware it was. Because I must have watched this when I was about 12, 13, and I'd never seen a film that was very, like, not just very good, but also so self-aware, and it was explaining what's going to happen in the film to you via these characters. So they'd have Randy telling everyone about the
Yeah.
rules, like, don't drink, don't do drugs, don't have sex, don't do this, don't say I'll be right back, and then he's like, I'll be right back, and it's like, this film,
Ooh,
exactly,
yeah.
yeah, and it was so good for that.
It is true though. Like all these cliches worked in horror films, especially if you're a girl in horror movies. You basically had two roles. You were either the dumb blonde who gets with a big boobs who gets killed because she smokes and drinks, and God forbid she has sex. You know, I'm using air quotes here. And then you have the semi-attractive brunette virgin who's a good girl, stays in school, doesn't smoke, doesn't drink. Doesn't Halloween, like say Halloween set up the rules for the slasher genre. Laurie is the main final girl. You got her two friends who both smoke, they both drink, they both have boyfriends, they're both having sex, and they get killed. And then Laurie is a good little girl who doesn't smoke, she doesn't drink, she doesn't have a boyfriend, she does well in school, she spends her free time babysitting younger kids, reading to them, preparing them treats, and she lives because she's this example of how society wants women to behave. It does tell you a lot. I wrote an essay about it when I was in college about the role of women in the horror genre, particularly the slasher genre.
Mm-hmm.
And as a society, I argue that we seem to find female sexuality very threatening. And it's demonstrated in these horror films by the fact that these women, these teen girls, do enjoy smoking, drinking, and having sex. All the things that men are perfectly entitled to do, and nothing bad happens to them. I mean, these guys get killed in horror films as well, but particularly women. It's definitely a warning to women that if you smoke, if you drink, if you have sex, you will be punished. If you're a good girl, you live. And because it's aimed at teenagers as well, who are going to be watching these. Teenagers are going to be watching these films, so teenage girls are going to have this sort of lesson thrown at them, like this is how you, as a female, should behave.
Yeah, I think you're right. That's definitely one of the themes throughout slasher films and horror films in general. But let's go back into Scream. We mentioned the opening scene and what happened with Casey and Steve, Drew Barrymore's character, and her boyfriend both got murdered. And then we see Billy, he climbs through the window of Neve Campbell, and we're starting to get a little bit of what you talked about. She's got that kind of issue with intimacy with him. And then we see the next day in school, and that's where we start to finally hear about all the murders, and we're hearing through Tatum Riley, Rose McGowan's character, she's saying, wow, have you heard about it? There's been a murder. It's been terrible. Apparently they've been gutted. They're unrecognisable. It's the worst killing that's ever happened, even worse than. And then she stops. It's a dramatic pause, and then she just swiftly moves on, and it's the first hint that we get that something's really happened to Neve's mum in the past. I like how we start to use Tatum as a tool to kind of push forward the narrative of the film and really start to dig down into these character backgrounds. But one of my favourite scenes in the entire film is where the couples, they're all sat around and they're all sat on the water fountain, and kind of Billy Loomis is with Sidney Prescott, and then Stuart is with Tatum, and then you've got Randy off to the side, and then they're all talking about it, and Randy's the big fan of horror films, and he's saying, well, Stuart, you could be the killer, and Stuart's kind of joking around, and Sidney's like, I don't get it, how could you gut somebody? And Stuart just outright says, well, you put a knife in the groin area, and you pull it up through the belly, and it's like, there's subtle hints that things are going on behind the scenes. It's kind of breadcrumbs that are leading us to the end that you don't really pick up on until you watch it multiple times. But Billy's looking at him like, shut up, man. And at the time, you kind of think, shut up because you're upsetting Sydney. But really, he's kind of saying, no, shut up because you're giving the game away a little bit. Now, this is only really the third scene in the film, but we're getting some really good character development stuff going on here, because we've already got to know Sydney and Billy earlier on with the scene where he climbs through the window, but now we're getting to know Randy, and he's the horror buff, and we're also getting to know Stuart, the best friend, who's a bit like the class clown. He's a bit of the freak. He doesn't really have a filter. And then you're getting to know his girlfriend Tatum as well, who she kind of doesn't have a filter. She's kind of just a good-looking kind of airhead.
They're taking the piss and they treat it like a joke, and again, spoilers, but that zany, tactless character that Matthew Lillard plays, the Joker, the sort of class clown, he's sort of one of the last people you would expect to be the killer, that the class clown would usually get murdered. And the sensitive boyfriend as well, he turns out to be one of the killers as well, which is, again, a huge turnaround.
It really was a huge turnaround from what they used to do in the genre, but funnily enough, because by the time I watched it, it's probably like a good 5-6 years after it's happened, all the things that I've seen in the media since this had come out, they'd kind of taken from it and borrowed from it. So when it came to actually watching this film, I kind of guessed that the boyfriend was going to be one of the killers. And then when he gets stabbed in the end, that was a huge, huge shock for me, because I was like, wow, I was certain he was going to be one of the killers. And obviously they do another reverse twist at the end where it turns out he was the killer and they faked his own stabbing. And in Scream, they do really play around with this, don't they? They really do mess with the typical things that you expect in a horror film.
It's a way of flipping the genre on its head, because that's what Scream aimed to do, you know, like, in a way, in its own way, parody these cliches of the slasher genre, and in the same way, do something completely different. Like, for example, in the final scene that, you know, she does actually sleep with her boyfriend. She finally sleeps with him.
And that is a part of the evilness of this Billy Loomis character. We see him at the beginning of the film, and he's climbing in through the window, and he's like the honk boyfriend, but then he starts to get a bit creepy, and he's mentioning the fact that their love life's not really carrying on the way he wants it to, and they've never done it. And then she starts to say, like, okay, I'll meet you kind of halfway, and I'll show you this, and she takes her top off. And then as we go through, we find out that she's got intimacy issues because her mother was talked about as a slut and all these derogatory terms, and that she doesn't want people to think the same thing as her. She doesn't want to get that same reputation, so she's making him go really, really slowly in the relationship. And then as the film goes on, we get to one of the penultimate scenes, and then she finally happens. She finally gives himself to Billy. And then not long afterwards, we find out that he was the killer. And not just that, he killed her mum, and that he'd raped her mum. And it's what an evil thing to do, to rape your girlfriend's mum and then take her virginity. It is an absolutely evil bastard thing to do. And this kind of went against all the generic rules of the horror film franchises, didn't it? Because as a female character, once you have sex in a horror film, that's it, you're dead. But that's not quite what happens in Scream, is it?
So it's a sort of kissing goodbye to that old cliche of sex equals death for women in the horror genre. So yeah, that's another thing that's cleverly well done. And then, yeah, like you say, the backstory, you know, she has to deal with the fact that her mother had a reputation, and she talks about it. The whole thing is that the guy, Cotton Weary, who's accused of killing her mum, he claims that they were having an affair. And Sydney point blankly refuses to believe it. And she says, no, that's not what happened. He raped her and then he killed her. And then this alternative narrative that Gale provides that says, you know, his story has not changed one word. He admits to having sex with your mother. He admits that they were having an affair, but he denies that he killed her. And later she has to concede the fact that her mother, some of these rumors about her mother sleeping around were actually true. You know, it's the backstory and it's the drama and the emotion behind it that makes it that more compelling. And Tatum says, you know, your dad was away a lot. Maybe your mother was just a very unhappy woman. You know, it's possible. And
they even bring in Stuart's backstory as well. Stuart, who's played by Matthew Lillard, they bring in his backstory that, oh, didn't you used to go out with Casey, Drew Barrymore's character? Weren't you her boyfriend? Didn't she dump you for Steve? And that kind of provided motive for why maybe they'd want to kill Casey and Steve as well. Did give that good amount of detail there. And obviously Randy was the big horror movie buff, and he was the one who was telling everyone all the way through the film, these are the rules and this is what we have to abide by. Another thing I thought as well is how realistic it was, because in complete honesty, if someone did get murdered at a school, there would be that class clown who's making a joke out of it, and he's making those jokes like, oh, leave her alone and stuff, and he's not taking it seriously. And then you've got the people who pull the pranks, like kids started to run around in the ghost face mask, and then finally Winkler's character, the head teacher, again, another like megastar. He used to play the Fonz back in the day. He's the head teacher, and he's like, right, school's cancelled because there's a 5 p.m. quarantine. And that very much fits in with what's going on now at the moment in our lives. Is there's a huge quarantine at the moment. Everyone's got to stay home. I mean, he words it as a curfew. So I thought there was a nice little narrative there, how Scream kind of linked into what's going on now with everyone having a curfew and not being allowed outside. And then we got introduced to Dewey as well, who I thought was an absolutely terrible cop. What did you think of Dewey and the character?
I think, you know, the whole idea is, you know, with horror genres, the adults, especially the adults, people in authority, are useless or absent. So Sydney's been left on her own while her dad goes to a conference. and you never see anybody else's parents in that film, apart from Tatum's mum, but she's like a background character for like one scene, and the adults are completely clueless about what's going on.
Even
Dewey,
Casey's parents turn up after she's already been killed.
Yeah, Dewey's just supposed to be sort of exemplify that, this useless figure who's supposed to be a figure of authority. He's absolutely useless. He's scared easily. His own little sister doesn't respect him. And he says, he has that line, what did Mum tell you? When I wear this badge, you treat me like a man of the law. And she just is like, oh, fuck this. We're ready to go. Will you just hurry the fuck up already? That's a thing in horror genres, that the adults are predominantly useless. But in a way, it sort of flips that on his head. This bone idle cop who actually ends up being a hero, in a way. That's another way the genre that Scream
He's like the
respects
accidental
the genre,
hero, isn't he?
But changes things up. But yeah, I mean, horrors are usually aimed at teenagers as well, because it can also be interpreted as a metaphor for, this is when you're 16, 17. This is when you really start entering these first steps towards adulthood. You discover these vices like smoking and drinking and having sex, being left on your own, because, what parent is going to say, oh, 17, I should probably stay with them? You think, no, 17, they're old enough to handle things by themselves. And of course, these are very unusual circumstances. It's almost like a test of adulthood, in a way, for young people, and how you can also find, you can find safety in these older figures who are not necessarily the people you would expect. Like Gail turns out to be quite a hero in her way, and you mark her off as this nasty, ambitious journalist, but she ends up saving the day quite well as well. And all these parents, all these cops that you expect, that you trust to save the day, turn out to be fucking useless. So, again, it's another way of paying homage to these cliches of the slasher genre, but also flipping its head, getting it ready for a new generation. And it works, because after Scream, it revitalized the genre. The slasher had I Know What You Did Last Summer. All these new horror movies of the 90s started about again, and it definitely vitalized the slasher genre for a new generation of horror fans. There's a lot to be said for Scream, and it's not, I don't think you can cast it off as just another cheap slasher flick. The intelligence behind it, it's, a key part of popular culture. All too often, horror films get dismissed by critics cheap and nasty, no substance. There is. You just have to look for it. You just have to keep an open mind, and you will find it. It is there.
Yeah, definitely. And just to go back to Dewey, he was really this laughable character of, he's trying to be the big man in town. He's always mentioned, oh yeah, I'm the sheriff's deputy and all this stuff. But then the last thing that the sheriff says to him in the film, I believe, just before the house party, is make sure Sydney doesn't leave your sight. And what does he do? He drops her off at a house party where there's tons of people and she can be possibly killed. And that's where the final scene happens. And it just really shows his ineptness. And that's the final scene, isn't it? The house party. Randy starts to really come into his own. Stuart starts to have those lines of, I'll be right back, and all that stuff. And it all starts to really kick off. And then we see the death of Rose McGowan's character, Tatum, as well.
Yeah.
Which I always thought was such a good scene, and Scary Movie parodied it really, really well with
yeah, it did. It really did.
With the girl from American Pie.
It parodied it very well with Dewey as well. Because they had Doofy, and that was just brilliant. And Gail Weathers as well is parodied as well. It's
Gail Swallows,
it's parodied very well by Scary Movie, and they're even talking. They have that same scene with the by the water fountain with all the couples, and it's just like, oh, you're probably right. I mean, if it was a horror movie, they'd probably cast some dingbat like Jennifer Love Huge Tits to play me, and the other guys like, yeah, and they get late 20s, early 30s to play us. And they're all laughing, and it's like, yeah, it's true, because they were all in their 20s probably, and they're all playing high school kids as well,
And Scary Movie is such a great companion piece to Scream, isn't it, in that sense? Scream did have its comedic elements itself, but Scary Movie just went all out and was like, we're going to take the piss out of the piss take. So that I thought was really clever.
Absolutely. And it was done so brilliantly. Well,
so what did you think of the end house party scene then?
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? A lot of these things end with a big house party. You need this big distraction where people are distracted, and that's how the killer separates them. That's how they get killed, and then that's the big final showdown. I mean, not in Halloween or anything, but in other horror films, the slasher genre, like Prom Night, for example. That's a very old one with Jamie Lee Curtis. They have this big, it's their high school prom, and that's the big sort of party where people get separated, everybody's distracted, and that's when the killer starts off one by one, and then there's a reveal at the end, So, you had to have the house party for the big reveal, for the drama, and it works absolutely well because the backstory is finally explained. Spoiler alert, the killer is revealed after she's slept with Billy. It looks like he's been attacked by the killer, and she's about to escape, and then it's revealed he's alive, and she thinks he's all crippled and injured, and then it turns around and he's like, we all go a little mad sometimes, and then he shoots Randy, and you're like, oh shit, he's a killer? How is that possible? And she runs immediately into Stu, and Stu's revealed to be the second killer, and you're like, whoa, 2 killers? That's whoa! And then the big reveal where it's revealed why they've done all this, partly for shits and giggles because they're both psychos, but for Billy it goes deeper because it turns out that not only was Sydney's mother having an affair with Cotton Weary, she was also having an affair with Billy's father, and that's the reason his mother left the family home. So obviously killed Sydney's mother for that, and it's all just sort of gone downhill from there. So it's a great dramatic reveal as well, as every slasher film should be.
Definitely, and I think it's the perfect setting for it as well, because we've got this kind of movie where it's all about these good-looking teenage kids, and then they're having this house party. Because from the outside looking in, just from obviously a viewer's perspective, you're looking at it like you're watching the cool kids in high school, and they're all having fun without you. They're having this house party, and then they all start getting killed one by one, and it's just such a perfect ending in that sense. It's because they could have set it anywhere. They could have set it in a barn. They could have set it anywhere, but they decided no, it's going to be a house party. It's going to be that classic trope of all these cool kids, all these popular kids, all these good-looking kids. They're all going to be having a party together, and then everything starts going wrong, and then one by one, they're all going to get knocked off until there's one surviving. And it's not just one person in the end; it's a surviving group of characters who you end up rooting for them all. Like Dewey, like you said, he's kind of a bit hapless, but you're rooting for him. Gail Weathers, she's this hard-nosed bitch who, like, she's only really caring about herself, but again, you want to root for it by the end as well. And also, you've obviously got
there's one scene
Sydney
in particular with Gail that actually spooks me a little, that really had my blood running cold a little bit. It's when she's turned up to the house party, and she's set a camera up in there to record everything. And there's a delay, some sort of delay between the time she turned the camera on, and she got back to the house, and Kenny, her cameraman, who she abuses horribly, once they realise shit's going down, and she realises he's gone, and there's this thing where she sort of like screams out his name, and it sort of echoes, and then the music sort of gets quite dramatic. Like, oh shit, she's in the shit now, and then suddenly she realises she's stepped in the blood. Then it's like suddenly the adults are dragged into it. These adults who are not supposed to be authority figures, who are not sort of prepared for the horror that you're facing. These unintentional adults are dragged into it as well. Gail didn't think she was going to be dragged into it. She just thought she's going to get the cover of this story, and it's great, and it's going to soar her to fame heights.
Yeah, it's just such a perfect end scene. But besides this part of the film, then, what was your favourite scene in the film, or scenes?
I liked the bit where Sydney first attacked, not long after Casey and Steve got killed. Sydney's left alone. Tatum's supposed to be coming towards her to her house. They're just gonna hang out, and Sydney's just going around the house about her business, and she dozes off on the couch and wakes up, and then suddenly she gets these phone calls. The tension sort of mounts because they're having this conversation. She thinks it's that old cliche, it's somebody playing a prank, and she says, I don't watch those horror movies. They're always about some big-breasted girl who's always running up the stairs when she's running out the door. And then suddenly he says, I'm on the front porch, and really? Call your bluff. And then he's not there, and then the killer finally gets nasty, He says, you hang up on me and you'll die just like your mother. That really shocks her, that upsets her. And then boom, the killer's been hiding in the cupboard the whole time. And it's that big fight, and she ends up doing exactly what she said not to do in horror movies. She ends up running up the stairs because she can't get out the front door.
Yeah.
She ends up running up the stairs and locking the door.
Yeah, my favourite film was the video shop, where they're in the video shop and Randy's working there. Billy and Stuart are in there to get VHS tapes, and Randy's going over like, oh, of course he can be the killer, of course he can be the killer. Then all of a sudden he just turns up behind him, and that was just such a classic trope of like 90s movies, the video store, because obviously we don't get that anymore because they don't exist. But I always get really nostalgic whenever I see any of these films.
I do as well, yeah.
And they have a video store.
It's a simpler time, wasn't it? And that was the highlight of people's weeks, really, wasn't it? The weekend, renting videos. That was one of my favorite times when I was growing up. And it was very sad. We just saw, Blockbuster go under because DVDs were coming out so quickly and everything was available, Sky, Netflix, Amazon Prime. And it was one of those that unfortunately just passed on with the modern technology, which is it's a shame in a way. It's the memories are enjoyable, just remembering getting excited to go to the video store, what's new out. Because back in the day, it'd take them like 6 months or something to be on video, wouldn't it? And then slowly DVDs came in. And it's like you hardly have to wait any all now from when they're out, from when they're in the cinemas to when they're available in the store. You hardly have to wait.
Definitely, quite often they just go straight to Netflix as well. They don't even go to the cinema now. Films like The Irishman, that was like a really popular film last year, straight to Netflix.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of things in this movie that like made me really nostalgic. Like the fact that Billy was caught with a mobile phone was kind of seen as something outrageous. Like, why'd you have a cell phone, kid? Like, he's like, everyone has them.
Yeah.
But of course, literally everyone has them now. And they were like, oh, we're going to have to pull your phone records, which nowadays you could just go on the call log and look at whatever you've been phoning. And again, the very first scene after the opening scene where Billy climbs through Sydney's window because he just wanted to talk to her. You could just text nowadays. You could just Facebook message them. You could WhatsApp them. You could do so many things. But in those days, you had to just go up and turn up at the house and climb through the window, which made me quite nostalgic.
Simpler time, yeah. That was lost on me as well, that line, when I first watched it, because I was about 14 and everyone had a mobile then. I got my first mobile phone when I was 11. And, everyone had one then by 14. I mean, they couldn't do all the things that we can do now with them, but
sure,
they're pretty much a standard thing that everybody had. So that line threw me a little bit. I was like, why is this shocked that he has a mobile? And this was only like 8 years before. And it's like, in those 8 years, it's gone from, this is suspicious, he has a mobile phone, to absolutely everyone's got one. So yeah, I get what you're saying there. Yeah, it does make you a little bit nostalgic for the simpler times as well. But that's in a way that's why they sort of did Scream 4. Scream 4 updated it even more with Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram. It brought all that. It sort of brought it into the
Scream universe.
Because have you seen Scream 4?
I've seen it, but I've only seen it once, and I don't really remember anything from it. So I'm actually going to re-watch it again because I don't remember who the killer was. I don't remember the storyline or anything like that. So
well, I shan't reveal it then because I don't want to spoil it. But yeah, but that updated it all, and it's got and again, it's kind of trying to do what the original Scream did. 15 years later.
Revolutionize it
again. The genre's up. The genre's updated. We can get so tired so quickly. You need to introduce new things to keep it fresh, and it does that with Facebook, Instagram, the celebrity status that's very a part of our culture nowadays. Worth watching. I was a bit gutted that it didn't start another trilogy in a way.
Yeah, but, I'd love it to start another trilogy. Like, I don't remember the film too much, but I would love to see another Scream trilogy because this film is really near and dear to my heart. That's why when I wanted to do this nostalgia podcast, talking about things from the past that makes me feel all that warm, gooey feeling inside, I thought I've got to talk about Scream because Scream for me is one of the greatest movies of all time. Even if it's not one of the best movies of all time, it is to me. In my life, it is to me.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, what did you think then of all these spin-offs that it created? Because it did create like a couple television series spin-offs. What did you think of those?
Well, I think the Scream TV series was actually very good because I think we're now in an age, we've had all these very popular TV series like Game of Thrones, for example. And I think we've
Yeah,
discovered that we enjoy these TV series a lot more than films because films don't allow as much for character development. You
sure,
know,
yeah.
if Game of
Everything's over
Thrones had
within
been a
2, 3 hours.
movie, if Game of Thrones had been a movie, if they'd crammed all that into 2, 3 hours, or if they'd done like a series of Game of Thrones films, 2, 3 hours of film, I don't think it would have been as good because films don't allow you as much time for character development. But if you have a 1 hour episode every week, that allows for so much more character development. People become a lot more emotionally invested in the characters. And I do think sometimes it makes me think if films will actually carry on much longer, if films will carry on, if it'll all just be TV series. Because there's so many films that I've seen lately that I've thought it was good, but if it was a TV series, it would have been much better. And I think that's what Scream tried to do. And they had a very talented cast of actors in the Scream TV series, but unfortunately, it got cancelled after 2 seasons, and it left it on. And I fucking hate it when they do that. It's like that's not a really good way to treat the audience. At least if you're going to cancel a series, give them an opportunity to finish it off. Don't leave it on a cliffhanger. Absolutely. It's like spitting in the face of the fans who've invested their time into watching the show. But the film has a different setting. It has a different set of characters. And it doesn't make any references to the Scream films at all. Things that Scream does. It uses, horror slasher cliches, to tell its story.
Yeah. Did you see the third season that they did?
No, I didn't, because the second season, because they had a new cast, didn't they?
Yeah.
For the third season, and I really wasn't cool with that. They sort of rebooted the season. It's like it's only been going on for 2 seasons. What are you doing?
And it really wasn't good. It almost killed my love for Scream. That final season that they just did, the third season, which is like a reboot, it kind of killed my love for Scream because it was really quite bad.
Yeah, the Scream TV series itself was actually very good. The 2 seasons,
Yeah, I enjoyed them.
You had a lot going on, and again, it had these examples of turning the genre on its head. You had this blonde girl, Brooke, who was, pretty much a rich, spoiled socialite with a hot boyfriend, but she has layers. She's quite sensitive, and she has this determination. She's a skinny little thing as well, and you think, oh, she in a normal horror film, she would be the first to go, but you're actually rooting for this. So yeah, these 2 seasons, they were actually very well done, I thought. That's what they seem to do right. They get good-looking people who can also act. But yeah, after I found out they cancelled it and were going to reboot it, I was like, I don't even want to watch the third season because I want to find out. I want you to carry on with the second season. I want to go see what happens from there. So
yeah, you've made me invest in 2 seasons, and then just as I've got into it, you've gone, nah, we're going to sack that off now, get invested in a new season. And we're like, what? No, give me the other stuff that we were doing before.
With TV series, you have better chance for character development, and it gives the audience a chance to emotionally invest in the characters more. That's the advantage TV series have over films. So what they will do after this, I don't know. But unfortunately, I think Wes Craven died not long after. I think he died not long after the first season of Scream premiered. So I think after that, it all sort of went to hell. So I don't know. You don't know who on charge, whether it's Wes Craven's son, because his son is also a horror producer. He carries on his father's work, or whether the studio owns the rights to Scream. But I can't imagine that anyone from Wes Craven's family would, invest in a series that was bad. So my guess is they probably don't own the rights, and that's why the third season was so bad.
So, Andrew, where does this leave you with Scream, the film? What out of 10, what would you rate it? 1996's Scream.
It would be a very high mark. I'd definitely rate it 8 or 9 out of 10. It has everything. It's intelligent. You've got good actors, and it is actually scary, which first and foremost you want a horror movie to be able to do. If it doesn't scare you, it's not the job very well. It's scary, and it is a vital film if you're a fan of the horror genre. It revitalized the genre for the 90s, for the next generation of horror fans. You have 70s and 80s horror films which set up all these rules and all these cliches that were defining for the genre, and Scream self-aware enough to parody it, but also use it a smart way, and also flip these genres, flip these cliches on the head, make them new and refreshing, taking old things out that don't really work anymore, and putting new things in that do work for a new generation. You have to reflect the changes in society as well. So, by the 1990s, obviously, we have third wave feminism, we have girl power, and people are saying, well, sex does not equal death. This is bullshit. A new generation of women who are watching horror films are going to be like, no, that's crap. I can be smart, I can smoke, and I can still kick some ass. And that's sort of what Buffy the Vampire Slayer was about as well. You have this, Buffy is a blonde girl, and the whole idea behind Buffy was that that's turning the dumb blonde character. She's not very bright. She's your stereotypical blonde, but she's also like this girl who can kick major ass. She fights these forces of evil with all these karate funk moves. So that's another example of the horror genre being turned on its head in the 90s. So Scream and Buffy are definitely two elements of 90s horror that you need to know, that you need to understand, and you need to respect to know anything about the horror genre. It's entertaining, it's funny in its parts, it has some good backstory, and yeah, it's scary. It can still make you jump. It uses the right amount of suspense and shock, which is perfect for any horror movie. You have to get that formula right in a horror
Definitely,
movie.
and that's one thing that I think Scream really did get right. I think they got the formula bang on, to be honest with you. And I'm going to upset a lot of people now. A lot of people don't like giving 10s, but I'm going to give this a 10. Scream for me is a 10 because it came around at a time. I love 90s media. I absolutely love 90s media. And this for me is proper cool 90s. This Scream film, everything about it was perfect for me. There was nothing in there that I would say, do you know what, I want to change this or I want to change that. There's nothing that I want to change. I'm perfectly happy with everything that happened in this film. So for me, I would give it a 10. And like you said, it revitalized horror as a genre, but it then launched a new horror franchise. And one of the most popular franchises in horror history, because even though they've only done 4 films at this point, they have done 3 TV series, and they've not quite jumped the shark as much as some of the other horror franchises have done, like Friday the 13th, for example.
Oh, bloody hell, that remake was appalling. And the remake of Nightmare on Elm Street, don't even get me started. The person who remade that should be in prison for desecration because it was bad. But the Scream movies have been all done by Wes Craven, who knows his shit. He knows what he's talking about. So rather than remaking Scream, because it came out, Scream 4 came out in 2011 when there were a lot of horror remakes being done rather badly, I might add. But rather than remake Scream, he thought, no, what I can do is I can, again, flip the genre on its head. I can bring in these new teen stars today and make them the young cast and bring back this older cast, these iconic 90s actors. I can do something with that. And it worked brilliantly again. Once again, parodying these cliches of slasher culture and acknowledging them, being self-aware, and also introducing new elements that may not be very compatible with the new generation that would have been okay in the 90s, but not really okay anymore. Moving it on, but while still paying tribute to the classic Scream film.
Is she called Hayden Panettiere? She was in the Scream remake, the 4th one, wasn't she?
Yeah, and Emma Roberts as well. She's an actress who's been on American Horror Story quite a lot. She's a bit of a modern-day Scream queen.
Yeah, because I remember at the time, it was 2011, I'd just finished uni, and a mate of mine had moved to America, and I remember him posting pictures on Facebook of Hayden Panettiere saying like, oh, I've just ended up going past the set where the Screaming film, I think, the filming Scream, not the Screaming film. He just happened to walk past in the street and it had all been like blocked off and stuff like that. And I remember thinking, oh, that's pretty cool that he's doing that. And like I say, I really want to rewatch that 4th film. But there's lots of iconic characters in this first Scream film. Which ones for you are your favourites, or which ones do you kind of relate to more in this opening film?
Oh, tricky. I think Gale Weathers is definitely one of the most memorable characters for me. Dewey as well is you can't miss him. He has a sort of iconic look. He has that really that stupid mustache, doesn't he? And it's parodied so well in Scary Movie. And Gale Weathers, she's the she's this ambitious, hard-nosed woman, but she's also the brain. Randy's sort of the brains for the horror genre, but Gale's the one who finds stuff out. Gail's the one who sort of discovers all this backstory in the later film. In Scream 3 in particular, she's the one who she basically does the work of the police, and of course, Sydney's very iconic as well because she took, Nev Campbell took this stereotypical role of the brunette virgin, the quite dowdy one compared to the glamorous blonde. She sort of turned it as well. So, and she brings a lot to the character. She brings a lot of the trauma that Sydney's faced the character. And going into Scream 3 a little bit, you can see the development of the character because she's reached a point in Scream 3 where she's that traumatized. She lives in isolation from it all.
Yeah.
And then
which is natural. You definitely would do, wouldn't you? If that was your real life, you'd be terrified.
There's one scene in particular. She visits the because in Scream they make movies out of the events that happen in Scream. Its own in movie called Stab, and she's on. She finally visits the set of Stab, where it's all being set up for the murder scene, and that's when she's attacked by the killer, and she manages to escape for a few seconds just at the top of the stairs. I remember this. It's like she's got her hands in her head, she's crying, and you can just tell she's fucking can't deal with this shit again. Like,
yeah, sure.
Oh my god, I've walked right back into it, and I just don't have the strength to deal with it again. And you can tell that. You can almost sense the PTSD that's she's probably no doubt suffering. It's never acknowledged or mentioned in the film because I don't think PTSD was a popular term back then. But
it wasn't. No.
Looking back, clearly she would have some form of post-traumatic stress disorder dealing with all this crap. So yeah, it's 100%. Very good.
I completely agree with you, but I don't know what this says about me, but the character that I'm most related to in this film, and especially when I rewatched it back today, was actually Stuart, and he's one of the killers, so I don't know what it says about me, but the fact that he was the class clown, he's always making inappropriate jokes, especially like live her alone, or you got people like this, but the way he's just so stupid, and right at the end of the film where I think Sydney's got the gun on him, and she's like threatening to kill him, and she's like, I've called the police, and he's like, oh my god, have you really called the police? And she's like, yeah, and he's like, oh no, my parents are going to kill me. Like, he's murdered all these people, he's going to go to prison for a long time, he's going to get in huge trouble with the police, but all he cares about is not getting in trouble with his parents, and I can really relate to that. Regardless of what I've done in life, it's always, oh shit, mum and dad are going to fucking kick my ass for this one.
I suppose I could relate to Randy because I was a bit of a nerd in high school. Randy's the nerd, the movie buff of the group.
Sure.
I'm quite knowledgeable about the horror genre as well, and he's quite nerdy. You have these two couples who are really popular, Billy and Sydney, and Tatum and Stewart. And Randy's sort of the outsider. He doesn't get any action or anything like that because he's considered such a nerd.
And he's longing after Sydney as well, isn't he?
Yeah, he lusts after Sydney, and then he has that great line in the end where he's where he lives, and she's like, "Oh my god, I thought you were dead." He goes, "I thought I was dead. I never thought I'd be so happy to be a virgin," because the virgins always live, and he's like, "Oh, I've lived because I'm a virgin," and
that's a great line.
In Scream 3 when he does a video presentation, he goes, "So if you're watching this, it means I'm dead, and means losing my virginity to such a person was probably not the best idea." So yeah, again, that's
I forgot about that scene where she rewatches his instructional video. That's a great scene.
Yeah, and so he's a very funny character, very nerdy, but so I could probably say he's the character that I was most like back in high school.
And what about your favourite quotes then for the film? What's your favourite quotes?
Ooh, what is it? Well, the killer definitely has a good line. Too many to mention.
What's your favourite scary movie?
Yeah. I think I think probably would be that line with oh no, definitely the best one is when Sydney's trying to walk out the police station and Gail sort of corners her and she tries to get her to give her an interview, and she's like, oh, she knows she's written a book about her, calling her a liar.
Yeah.
She's like, oh, so when's the book out? She's like, oh, it'll be out next year. I'll look for it. I'll send you a copy. And she just decks her in the face out of nowhere.
Yeah.
It's so, yeah. And then Tatum's just like, nice shot. And then all just
then they're
uttering
going
them
back
out,
over
and
it in the bedroom
Gail's
as
just
well.
like completely gobsmacked. She's been decked in the face by this teenage girl, this meek
Literally
little mouse girl.
gobsmacked.
Yeah. Pretty funny.
Yeah, and
That's a
then
good
I
line.
love that line from Casey, like at the start of the film, where she's kind of flirting with the killer a little bit. She's like, "Oh no, I've not got a boyfriend." And then when she starts to realize how serious it's getting, she's like, "My boyfriend's big and he'll kick your ass and he plays football." I thought like, that's such like a great like desperation line of just she doesn't know how to intimidate people, but that's all she can come out with is, "I've got a boyfriend and he's big and he plays football, so you should be scared." And they're like, "Oh really? Look at what I've done to him," and they've killed him on the porch.
Yeah, that is a good, yeah. And she has that line as well. This is partly due to Wes Craven, because Wes Craven directed A Nightmare on Elm Street. She's like, what's your favorite scary movie? And he goes, guess. She goes, Nightmare on Elm Street. It's like, yeah, that's the guy with the nice fingers. And she's like, yeah, the first film was good, but the rest sucked because Wes Craven didn't direct the other movies. That's quite another clever thing.
There's a couple little like that, like when Henry Winkler, the head teacher character, like he says, "Oh, you little bastards," and he comes out of his room. Like the janitor's wearing like a Nightmare on Elm Street style sweater, isn't he?
That is Wes Craven. That's Wes Craven, janitor.
Oh, is that Wes Craven?
That is literally Wes Craven. Yeah, that's his little cameo in his movies. That scene though as well, where the fucking hypocrite of the headmaster, he has a go at these teenagers for wearing these costumes, and then he puts it on himself. And then
I loved that. I absolutely loved that when I saw it.
Yeah, and then the killer's hiding behind that door. That made me jump. That fucking made me jump. I was not expecting that.
Yeah.
That did me up. And those two bitchy girls in the bathroom as well. They had some great lines as well. Sydney's in the bathroom and they don't know she's there. And they're trying to speculate who the killer is. She's like, why would Sydney? She has her own boyfriend, Billy. And that one goes, maybe she's a slut just like her mother. It's like, you're horrible. She's dead. It's like, please, everybody knows her mother was Ram. And you're just like, it's like, that is high school girls. I'm sorry, but that is high school girls. They are horrible, horrible creatures.
It's brutal, but it's realistic because that is what girls would say in real life. And that's what they do say in real life.
Yeah, they're horrible to each other, aren't they?
There's always going to be some bitchy girl who comes out with something. I mean, boys as well. There's always going to be someone who comes out with something nasty. Like we had those girls from that side of things, but we had Stuart from the other side of things who'd say horrible and stupid stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's just brilliant. It is very well done. I mean, I suppose I can change my answer and say I would give it a 10 because there is actually nothing wrong with it. There's no reason for me to take marks.
There we go.
Very well, it is very well crafted, so there's no reason why I should take any marks from it. It does exactly what it's intended to do, and it does it well. So yeah, I changed my answer. 10 out of 10.
Right, fantastic. So, Andrew, thank you very, very much for joining me for this episode of the Do You Remember Scream podcast. Is there anything you want to plug before you get off here?
I am a comedian, so I do stand up, so I have videos on the YouTube. It's the expression. So yeah, just type in Andrew Michael Grogan on YouTube, watch some of my videos because I could do some views, and yeah, watch Scream, watch Creep because that's another brilliant horror film. Just watch a lot of horror films because there's more depth to them than you might. Scream, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Creep, what was the other one? The Descent. Descent is very good. And watch all of the Scream films. They are very well done.
There you go, Andrew, setting you all lots and lots of homework. So, Andrew, thank you very, very much for joining me today. Everyone here listening, thank you very, very much for joining us. And hopefully, we'll be back soon with more content. See you later.
Hey, better fucking recording, mate.